Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers post-game reaction show. I just got back from my couch. I'm here in Los Angeles. I did not make the trip to Orlando. I will not be in Orlando or Indiana. I will be joining the team in Chicago and Memphis. So watch the game at home and have a lot of thoughts. It's certainly a different viewing experience watching it at home, being able to rewind and go over things in real time. So have a lot of notes on tonight's game. And it was an ugly one for the Lakers, particularly in the second half. They lost 118-106, their third straight loss and the seventh loss in the past 10 games. They are now 43-28, tied for the number 4 seed with the Memphis Grizzlies, but they have the head-to-head tiebreaker, both due to the season series, which the Lakers currently lead 2-1, and because of the conference tiebreaker, and they also lead their division. So Lakers, are, in that sense, are in a decent place in terms of the Memphis battle, but they are not in a decent place in terms of their momentum and rhythm and the way that this group is playing right now. There are some concerning things to be sure. But before we get into that, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the late night gang. A little bit earlier tonight, right? With the East Coast start time, it was a 4 p.m. Pacific start time. Game ended at 6:30 Pacific, so that's actually before most home Laker games start. Most start at 7 p.m., if not 7:30 p.m. So we're going a little bit earlier. It's like the early evening gang tonight. But shout out to everybody in the chat. I appreciate you all for rocking with me a little bit earlier than normal. So overarching thought for me off of tonight's game is the Lakers are officially in a rut, and it has only been 2 games with the official group back together, but I think it's been clear between those 2 games and really, again, kind of going back over this stretch of not having LeBron, not having Rui. I think there was an adjustment period there, of course, not having those guys. And then now it feels like the vibe has been a little bit off with this group, and they certainly could get it back at any moment. But tonight felt just like an accumulation of what's been going on over the past couple of weeks or so. JJ, after the game, talked about, he said that he just feels like they're going through it right now. He feels like the group looks tired, and he thinks that's kind of normal for teams to hit that point at some point later in the season, but it's obviously not ideal timing with them still fighting for playoff positioning. So it seems to be like I know LeBron's not speaking tonight. I don't know what else has been said because I'm not there, but I did watch JJ's post-game presser, and that was one of the big themes for him, was that they got to get back to executing, particularly defensively. He wants to get some more practice time this week, potentially in Indiana. It looks like they might have a shoot around and just get more on-court reps together because he thinks there's been some slippage on both sides because of, partly because of that. But I think like the defense playing the 28th ranked offense and giving up 118 points and just letting them do basically whatever they wanted, especially in the second half. The offense was not much better, if better at all, 106 points. And it felt like it was just a lot of hero ball with Luka and LeBron and to a lesser extent Austin, in terms of like those guys just making tough shots and beating their men one-on-one and really scoring in ISOs or picking on mismatches due to Orlando's switching scheme. Like there are some parallels between these 2 teams in terms of how they play, and Lakers obviously have far more offensive talent overall, but in terms of like having 2 bigger shot creators leading the offense, the Lakers have Luka and LeBron. Orlando has Franz and Paolo, and Lakers have more shooting, and Lakers are the better team. But not tonight and not through the couple of games in the season series. I do think Orlando is a tough matchup for the Lakers because of that. Like Franz is a little too shifty for most of their guys. Like he's either too big for some of the smaller guys or he's too shifty for some of the bigger guys. Paolo's just a beast. They didn't see him in that first matchup. So those two combined for 62 points on 22 of 43 shooting. They both were hitting some tough shots. They also were both getting to the free throw line and then also spraying out for threes and finding cutters and whatnot. So I think for the Lakers, continuing the Bulls theme, it was not as bad as the Bulls game, but they have to get reconnected. I think offensively, they need to go back to the drawing board. It was some of the offensive organization. I think that has really slipped, and it's just been a little bit too much pick and roll and just not having a coherent plan. I also think some of the shot making from the supporting cast has not been up to par recently, and tonight was a low turnover game, so you couldn't really blame the turnovers. Like I thought they actually bounced back well from the Chicago game in that sense. They only had 10 turnovers tonight after a 21 turnover game, so they cleaned that up. But the shot making was not there. They shot 31%, just 10 of 32 on threes. Also, 78.6% at the free throw line. They missed several free throws, which when you're taking 28, you're going to inevitably miss some. But it feels like the Lakers free throw shooting the last few games has been a bit shaky. And yeah, I mean, more to touch on in terms of like specific stuff, but I think the Lakers are going through it right now. To quote JJ, I agree with that. How quickly they will turn this around will determine, I think, that their seeding ultimately, right? They got to do it soon because the rest of the West, especially behind them, is like Minnesota lost today, and it's now standings watch time. As I've said multiple times, like every game is going to matter, and but those teams are right there. And if the Lakers are not careful, they could drop a little bit lower than expected, especially now with 11 games remaining for them. Notable performers tonight. Luka had 32, 7, and 7 on 9 of 23 shooting. Didn't love the shot selection earlier in the game. I thought it got better progressively. He did a really good job of getting to the free throw line. Also hit some tough threes, hit 4 threes, 10 for 11 at the free throw line. Only 3 turnovers, so he was better in that regard. LeBron, 24, 6, and 7, 9 of 18 shooting, 6 of 7 from the free throw line, 0 for 3 on threes. And I also thought that the defense, it was probably better than the Chicago game, but still there's like some of the, I mean, he had the worst plus minus on the team for whatever that's worth, by a decent amount, by 7 points. And it felt like just those minutes were not great, especially when the Lakers were going a bit smaller with him in there. DFS had 14 points, 7 rebounds. I thought he had a pretty good game. He hit 4 threes. He was like the only role player who was actually making shots offensively. And a lot of times Orlando was running their offense away from DFS and trying to get him switched away from the play. And then Austin had 18 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. I thought he had it going, and they kind of went away from him a little bit too much. Like I felt like this could have easily been a 25 plus point Austin game, because I mean they were guarding him with Corey Joseph and Anthony Black. Anthony Black had a really good game, but like I felt Austin had a size advantage against some of their smaller, point guard size guys. But that's really it, in my opinion, in terms like I thought Gabe had a good start and had a couple steals, hit that like mid-range jumper around the foul line, but then he didn't play as this is a weird game. A lot of guys had pretty shaky performances, to put it kindly. Stat of the night for me is Orlando plus 15 at the 3-point line. So Orlando entered this game as one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league. That they are right there in the bottom. I mean, they take the fewest threes in the league, and they are. I just checked post Luka trade because the Lakers have obviously had an increase. So looking at like post Luka trade, Lakers are 5th in terms of 3-point attempts per possession. The Magic are 28th. So 2 teams on the opposite end of the spectrum in that regard. But Orlando took 8 more threes than the Lakers, which I think was a byproduct of how LA was defending them. and selling out at the 3-point line, and that allowing, similar to the Chicago game, some subpar 3-point shooters to catch fire on open looks and basically put, have target practice out there. But then I look at the attempts, but I also look at the makes. They made 5 more threes than the Lakers. And for LA, they did get a slight advantage at the free throw line. They made 3 more free throws than the Magic. They attempted 5 more free throws than the Magic. So they won that battle. And Orlando is another high volume free throw shooting team. But LA losing the 3-point battle to me was a sign of just how, in terms of mismatch hunting and the way the offenses were being run, Orlando was just at a higher level than the Lakers were tonight. And that brings me to my takeaway number 1, which is Orlando overpowered the Lakers with over-the-top shot making. And it wasn't just over-the-top shot making. It was through the chest shot making and by the defender, open at the rim shot making. But I think, as I mentioned with the Chicago game, I thought that exposed some of the Lakers' defensive limitations. And one of the ways you could attack the Lakers is, pushing the ball even after makes, getting out in transition, getting into early offense, turning it into a bit of a track meet, and really attacking the Lakers. And doing so in some cases because they had so much space, because the Lakers were playing off of them. But I think really driving at the chest at some of these guys, playing more in the middle of the floor. And I thought Chicago did a really good job of just exposing some of the Lakers' point of attack limitations. And I thought tonight was a continuation of that. I don't think Orlando doesn't play with the same verve and pace that the Bulls do, but they were able to, I think, really, the first half was much better defensively for the Lakers than not. I thought they did a good job of shifting the Magic to, and this is when the Lakers defense has been at its best, is they shift them to the sidelines. They use the baseline and the sideline as defenders, and then they're doubling and they're forcing them to make lob passes or weak side kickouts with multiple Lakers there able to play the passing lanes. And that's how the Lakers generate some steals, can get out in transition. I thought Orlando did a really good job of refraining from playing on the sidelines as much in the second half, and they kept things much more in the middle of the floor, which is where the Lakers want to keep the ball out of. They're trying to shift you to the sidelines. So I thought Orlando won that chess match in the second half. I don't even know their total. So they had 60 points in the second half and 56 in the first half, although 58, in the first half. So about the same, but it just, they had that rough stretch in the middle of the fourth quarter when the Lakers cut it from 17 to 7, and it looked like they were potentially going to make it a game down the stretch. And then Franz responded, and that was the game. But I think when we look at, again, for me, a lot of this is always trying to extrapolate it out to a potential playoff series and a potential playoff matchup and an opponent, and how a team can attack the Lakers. And I think the Bulls showed a way. I think Orlando showed a way. And the thing with this, though, and I talked about this when I talked about Jalen Brunson attacking the Lakers and Zion attacking the Lakers. Some of these are one-off exceptions in terms of an opponent or a certain player having a certain advantage against the Lakers. That is not the case across the league or even across the conference. So looking at the rest of the West, there isn't another team that has basically 2 6'10" shot creators who have this blend of strength and athleticism and ball handling. So I think from that perspective, this to me is honestly more of an Orlando problem than anyone else. I do think there's some similarities with Boston, and Tatum and Brown are a better, they're not as big as Paolo and Franz, but they are a better combination and a similar combination. And honestly, they attack the Lakers in very similar ways. That they're more of a 3-point shooting team, and those guys can hit step backs and pull up. So you have to guard them a little bit. They space you out more. But it was a similar thing where I felt like they were just basically, they were running their own version of pick and roll screening actions to target Hunt, Austin, and Luka. some Gabe in there. Really everyone. Like I felt like everyone got it at some points. That they were going at Jaxson at the rim. He picked up some fouls. I'm gonna touch on that a little bit later. But really, they went at Rui a bit. They went at Goodway. But largely it was Austin, Luka, and then to a lesser extent Gabe, just because of his size, and they just overpowered them. And they were getting to their spots. They were blowing by them on the perimeter. They were getting to the rim. Overall, Franz only took 3 free throws, but Paolo took 12. They combined for 5 of the team's 15 threes. And as aforementioned, 22 of 43 shooting. And Paolo had some early turnovers. I think he had 3 in the first half, 1 in the second half. So they shored that up. They combined for 6 of the team's 8. And that's because the ball handling is so condensed with those two. But those two just did largely whatever they wanted. And they were just, anytime it was DFS or Vando, because of the Lakers defense and how it's run, they were able to pick the players they wanted to attack. And I thought the Lakers, for the second straight game, their backline rotations were just non-existent. And they had 7 steals, but 1 block. And Jaxson had the 1 block, and that was like in the beginning. I think it was in the first quarter, if I'm not mistaken. But I just felt like the Lakers, for the second straight time, were not making the plays defensively that we've been accustomed to them making more recently. And that was largely shifted toward the first half in terms of some of the steals and their defensive success. And then particularly in that third quarter, when they got outscored 34-18, I just thought Orlando had their way with them. And, I think this is something to monitor, of these types of ISO shot creators that can take the Lakers off the dribble and both get to the rim, but also score in the mid-range. I think of a guy like Shea kind of fits this description. Of course, as I mentioned, Tatum and Brown. I think Kawhi fits this description. I think Jimmy Butler is another one who could kind of do some of this. So those are the types of players I think can give the Lakers some problems. And it didn't help that Jaxson Hayes and Jared Vanderbilt played a combined 30 minutes tonight. And that's going to take me to my takeaway number 2, which was rough performances by Jaxson and Vando. This is back-to-back really rough performances for Vando. He had the one, I want to say, baseline. I think he had a short corner or baseline cut where LeBron hit him, and then it looked like he was open for a second. He got stripped, and that's been an issue with Vando. And I've long said, for those who've been listening for a while, I think Vando's finishing is actually a bigger issue than his shooting, because you can get away with a guy not being able to shoot, especially if you have 4 shooters in the rest of the lineup. There are ways to use a player offensively. But the bigger issue is Vando really struggles finishing through contact and in traffic. And because when he's on the floor, teams are often packing the paint. There are exceptions where he'll get an offensive rebound on a loose ball play and he gets a putback, or he gets a defense totally collapse. He gets a dump off pass and he gets the layup or the dunk. Usually the layup. He's also not really, the athleticism translates more defensively than offensively. He's not a big leaper or doesn't have a lot of pop and explosion offensively. But I think the biggest thing is he always brings the ball down and he gets stripped a lot. And he, I don't know the strips per 36 minutes, but I would assume for Vando, he's got to be up there on a per possession basis of getting stripped on the way up to the rim, because that's just he exposes the ball, he brings it down, and it's a bad habit, and it really limits his offensive utility. So I think another really rough performance for Vando. I thought defensively he had some good moments, and that continues to be obviously he's out there for his defense, but with the way the Lakers are switching as often as they do, that lends itself to teams just mismatch hunting and picking on the weakest defender. So I think a lot of times it was switching Vando out of the play and doing that intentionally. And then with Jaxson, I thought this was his worst game maybe since the Luka trade. I would really have to like think about another game, but off the top of my head, he had 4 points, 4 rebounds, he had more fouls than points or rebounds tonight, which, for him, he'd been pretty consistently in that like 8 to 12 point range recently. The rebounding had been a little bit better, kind of like 5 to 7 rebounds a night. Only 18 minutes for him, as aforementioned. And teams have really started to shift over and take away, as I've been saying, the rim running and the rolling to the basket. They are aware that Jaxson is a dynamic lob threat, and they're taking that away. That does open up some stuff on the weak side, but the Lakers haven't been making those shots. And I thought defensively, and just like it was kind of a regression game for Jaxson, in my opinion, in terms of I think I know he had one offensive foul at least. I forgot if he had two, but then some of the jumping at pump fakes, and it just felt like earlier in the season Jaxson, or even last season's Jaxson, rather than the one that we've seen for the past like 2+ months now. So I thought in this matchup, in particular, already the Lakers are at a size disadvantage. Like that's one of the biggest things that hurts them against Orlando. Is Orlando's just huge, and they have just as much size at basically every position, if not more, and they're a bit more athletic than the Lakers. But then you couple in Vando was struggling and kind of got benched in this one for the second straight game. He's played 23 minutes combined over the past 2 games. Jaxson is in foul trouble and kind of gets benched. And then the Lakers are playing these small ball looks with DFS, LeBron, and Rui. Rui has not really looked like himself. I thought he had some good defensive moments, but he took 4 shots in 24 minutes. That's not the Rui we're accustomed to. Part of that was how the offense has been run. And I also think part of it's him still finding his rhythm, finding his legs and whatnot. But he did not look like the same player. Like LeBron has not looked the same defensively. I give those guys a little bit of a pass just because it's second game back after missing 2+ weeks. But like DFS could only do so much out there. And this was just a tough matchup to play so small in. And that was, I think, largely because Jaxson and Vando, who are their two, Jackson's obviously the starting center, but then Vando is essentially the backup center and plays in these small ball looks. He did not play well, and those two combining for only 30 of the 48 center minutes, we'll say that was just that was just too not enough. So then takeaway number 3 is looking ahead to the rest of the trip. So Lakers still have 3 more road games where they are now 15-19 on the road. And that's a little misleading because part of that is off of that 0-4 road trip that they just had, which knocked their road record down. They'd been a much better road team more recently, but earlier in the season, they struggled on the road. In general, like they are a much stronger home team than road team. And looking at the next 3 games, there's one clear trend with Indiana, Chicago, and Memphis. They all play fast. Memphis leads the league in pace. We just saw what Chicago did to the Lakers, and Indiana is 7th in pace. So they're playing 3 teams in the top 7 in pace. And I think that those 3 teams can all attack the Lakers in similar ways. Again, Chicago just has to look at the film from a couple of days ago and try to replicate that game plan as best as they can. And I don't think they're going to shoot as well, but if they could still get out and transition in early offense, they can at least make that like a close game, and then they're the home team. Indiana is a team that we've seen have a lot of offensive success against the Lakers over the past couple seasons, and they play fast. They get out in transition. They have not been playing as well recently, but neither has Memphis, but they still lead the league in pace. And so looking at it, like those are 3 teams that the Lakers should probably go, even with them in a bit of a rut right now, like 2-1, I would say. At least, I mean, they if they're playing the way they were playing 2-3 weeks ago, they'd be going 3-0, I think, over this stretch. But with the way they're playing, I'm going to assume they lose at least one of the 3. So let's say 2-1. Like they should go 2-1. But we'll see now with like playing some younger teams, some faster teams, and some teams that can really attack them if they're not getting back. And if they are as tired as JJ is maybe implying they are, these three teams are these three games are going to be real tests for their defense and for you could continue to pick on Austin or Luka and attack those guys off the dribble. And I just think right now that the combination of the point of attack defense and the rotations, they've both been bad the last two games. Again, this game in the first half I thought was much better than the second half. And certainly there's an element of Orlando getting hot. I mean, Anthony Black hit 3 threes. There was some of the Franz, who's not a good shooter statistically, like they wanted him to shoot threes, but he burned them, and he also burned them in LA with that. So I think Lakers in a bit of a rough spot right now. I think things are going to be okay. I think part of this is just the acclimation and readjustment process with LeBron and Rui back in the lineup. I don't think either one of them has looked like themselves physically yet. And LeBron played 38 minutes tonight, so he's playing heavy minutes. Rui played 24. He played a little bit more, but that's also on the top end of his minutes restriction. So this is going to be something to monitor. Of like they're trying to reintegrate these two guys, but they also need to win games, and it's tough because it's not even about those two guys in particular. It's just more so like there is an adjustment to changing your offense and your defense and how it's functioning dramatically, really, with those two guys, and like trying to get them acclimated, but also trying to make these adjustments and go back to the identity you had 3 weeks ago. So they're in a tough spot, but I think it will get better soon, potentially as soon as the Indiana game. But that is a team that does play with a lot of pace, and if the Lakers are not careful, like we've seen them attack the Lakers off the dribble a lot and have transition success against them, and just get up a bunch of threes and play a certain style. So it will be a nice test here for the Lakers over the next rest of this week. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. See, we got a few super chats. First one from the notorious_CRG. Hate to live and die game to game. This temporary. I think it's temporary. I don't think this is the Lakers. I do think. I think the offense has been a little concerning for a bit now. The offensive organization, it's gone through like peaks and valleys, but I think the offense needs to be addressed and addressed soon. The defense, I think these have been two unique matchups where in some ways there's some similarities of like teams with big ball handlers and shot creators who can attack the Lakers off the dribble. And that is I think a potential weakness, if not just a flat out weakness for this team defensively. But Chicago's caught fire. They are a top 10 offense and a top 11 defense right now over their past 10 games. So like Chicago's just playing at a really high level right now. So I think the Lakers caught them at a bad time. Also with the first game back for LeBron and Rui. And then tonight, I think Orlando is just a tough matchup for them, with Franz and Paolo being able to attack basically anybody on the Lakers off the dribble and create floaters, mid-range jumpers, draw fouls, kick out passes to shooters. Like, I think those two guys are unique problems for the Lakers offense. So I think, again, I think they are in a bit of a rut, because you can't deny now it's 3 straight games. They punted one of them, but it is 7 of 10. And again, context, they didn't have LeBron, they didn't have Rui for part of that, but like I do believe to some extent in momentum, and like the momentum has been going against the Lakers right now, and that also matches some of the things JJ's been saying. So they got to turn this around, and maybe having a shoot around on Wednesday will help them. But I do think this is temporary. I think my bigger concern would just be these last 2 games, like on paper, were games they should have won against 2 sub 500 teams. And if we look at the flip side of it, if the Lakers win against Chicago and against Orlando, they are 45-26, a half game back of Houston for the number 2 seed. Now they are 2.5 games back of Houston for the number 2 seed. So this it has not eliminated the 2 seed as a possibility. They still play Houston twice, so they control their own destiny to some extent. But it is making it less likely with only 11 games left that they are able to catch Houston and jump them. So that is something that, like, again, with each mounting loss, that becomes a little bit harder to achieve. So I think in terms of them earning a 2 or 3 seed, like they got to turn it around sooner than later. And really, like, I mean, JJ said after the Chicago game, we need to turn this around Monday morning in Orlando. And then they ended up losing by double digits and like had a pretty uninspiring second half performance. So JJ kind of called the team out. He kind of said like they needed to do this and needed to address this, and they couldn't. So again, I'm not sounding any alarm bells to be clear. I'm just more so pointing out, like, they've largely responded well to JJ challenging them. This was one of the few times that they did not. And we'll see if this compounds or if they could turn this around again in Indiana, in Chicago, in Memphis. Like we'll see how the rest of this trip goes. Colby S30, thank you for the super chat. People say Dalton would have helped. Bad take, in my opinion. So Dalton, I didn't touch on the rotation, but I'm glad you did. Dalton got the first half shift. He hit the 3. Lakers were outscored 6 points in his 5 minutes. I think, again, the point I made the other night after the Chicago game was just like, if you've been paying attention to the rotation and JJ's preferences and how he's been using guys, like, Dalton is clearly the 10th man, and I just don't see who he's supposed to play over. Like, Jordan Goodwin didn't have his typical game in terms of, like, he's typically more active in the passing lanes and more rebounds and stuff. But like, even then, I thought Jordan Goodwin did some good things defensively. Gabe, I thought had a better first half than second half. Rui, I think they're trying to kind of play him back into rhythm. So I'm like, again, I keep coming back to, other than Vando, I don't really see who Dalton is supposed to be playing over. And even with Vando, he's on paper the best perimeter defender on this team, and he's 6'8" and can defend basically 1 through 5 or close to it. So it's like, you're going from that to Dalton. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of positional utility, skill sets. Like, Dalton is much more off-ball shooter who can create off the dribble if you give him those opportunities, though I don't think he's going to get those opportunities consistently with Luka, LeBron, and Austin back healthy, and even Rui. So he's a little bit marginalized offensively, and then defensively, for as much as Vando's maybe been not as impactful as he was as recently as like a week ago, he's still a much better defender and much more useful defender than Dalton. So I just don't know where the Dalton minutes are supposed to come from. If you want to argue Goodwin or Gabe, I can understand that. And you are adding some size out there, but those guys are much better defenders. And I think JJ has clearly shifted more toward defense with the bench. And actually, one positive, I think, longer term is I've mentioned like the Banshee lineup where more recently it's been Luka, but at times this season it's been Luka or LeBron with like 4 bench guys, and they all lean more defensive. One thing we saw tonight that I actually liked was, I believe it was Luka, Rui, and the Banshee lineup. I think it was like Luka, Rui, Vando, Goodwin, and Gabe. And I think that's a little bit more of a balance there. This was a tough matchup because of the size again, but in general, I like having a second, like, so that could be Dalton if you go Dalton instead of Rui, but now you're going smaller, you're worse defensively, you're worse on the glass. And so I kind of like that shift though of putting Rui in there. And that's also partly why earlier, before this whole, the Rui injury and before I think it crystallized like the way the team should be playing, I was partly arguing for DFS to start and Rui to come off the bench, because I liked then Rui being with some of those bench-centric lineups and being like the second option rather than him starting. And you still can get to some of the lineups of small ball or him with certain bench units, but the way JJ runs his rotation, it often is that bench forward in those lineups, and sometimes it would be DFS. And for as well as DFS has been shooting outside of the Chicago game over the past like 4 or 5 games, I still like Rui much more as like a second option than DFS or Gabe, let's say. So that's an ancillary thing. As for Dalton, I don't know. I don't see it happening. So again, I just don't see how he's going to be above the 10th man. And I think with this group and how JJ wants to use the rotation, the 10th man I don't see playing more than like 8 to 12 minutes a night. So could he have played maybe a second shift and a little bit more? Yes. I just don't see him with the healthy group going much more above that, unless it's like he comes in and has one of those stretches where he hits like 4 threes in a half quarter. Then I think he gets the second shift and maybe plays more. But barring that, I think he's kind of locked into this role for now. Steve Stevenson, thank you for the super chat. What do the Magic need to take a leap? Great team. I think the Magic, I mean, they need shooting, which is kind of ironic after their shooting performance tonight of 49% overall and 38% on threes. In general, they could use some more shooting. I also think they could use a bit more shot creation. Like if you actually look at Anthony Black had a good game tonight, and Wendell Carter, I thought did a pretty good job switching on to Luka and LeBron and Austin, and like he's a mobile, versatile big. But I think in general that they have offensive limitations. So I think really having a legitimate like third and fourth scoring options that are reliable behind Paolo and Franz, and then a bit more shooting. Like defensively, they're up there, and one healthy, they're right there with just about anybody. Like I think they've got the size, the athleticism to hang with most teams defensively. We barely saw Goga tonight. He only played 9 minutes. De Silva, Isaac, like those guys played more in the first matchup against the Lakers. So they've got a lot of weapons. Like they're a deep team. I think the biggest thing is the offense and the shooting, which is again ironic based on how tonight's game went. I do wonder if ultimately, for as good as Paolo and Franz are, I think at best, at like the absolute best, and I want to say the Ringer had maybe Franz at like 15 or 16 in their top 100. I think that's on like the high end. I don't know if I'd put him that high. And then I think Paolo was like 19 or 20. So they had like them with like 2 top 20 guys. I don't know if I'd put them that high. I would say certainly 2 top 30 guys ish, 30-ish, like probably both top 30. But I just wonder if like the fully, can they get to the level of you basically, unless you have a ridiculous like top 8, top 9, you kind of have to have the top 10 guy to win the title, and maybe Paolo or Franz can get there. I'm a little skeptical they can get to like that level. I think they can maybe get like right below it. So I ultimately wonder if they truly need like the real number one that slots them at like 2 and 3, and then you have that I don't want to say big 3, but I guess big 3 potentially with like the depth that they have. That's a lot easier said than done. I just think like looking at if you go through like Tatum top 10 player and Brown ultimately outplayed him in the finals, then Jokic best player in the world, Steph top 10 if not top 5 guy at that time, going on and on down the list of obviously Giannis in 2021, LeBron and AD were both top 5 guys, if not top 3. Then 2019 was Kawhi had that. So like you always need a top 10, if not like top 5 guy to win the title. And I don't think they're quite at that level. Ben, thank you for the super chat. It seems like they're just trying to cruise until playoffs. LeBron just wants to stay healthy and isn't going so hard. I think we're going to be fine. I don't necessarily agree with the first part. I think they're tired. I agree with JJ. I think they look tired. And I think there's multiple factors that are leading to this. I think, as JJ noted after the Chicago game, they played 7 games in 10 days. We could even push that out now to 8 games in 12 days, which is still a lot for a 12-day period. I think there's something to the Lakers style of play where like their style of defense, even tonight, I think you saw the difference in the first half and the second half of like the doubling and the rotating and swarming and then spraying back out to shooters and rotating and scrambling. That is tiring. That is very, like, they play a very tiring style of defense, and they were sustaining it for like almost 2 months. But then you get some of the injuries. You have certain guys playing even heavier minutes and carrying a heavier load. And I think that all compounds and it accumulates into guys just not having the same level of energy and their legs being a little bit tired. That also affects the shooting. So I think that there's been, and then you also have LeBron and Rui, who I just don't think physically have looked. And again, I always beat this drum when it comes to guys coming back from injuries. Like, I think it takes a little bit of time. With LeBron, what's interesting with LeBron is that it rarely takes time for him. He typically always looks like himself, and I think it's taken a little bit here over these first couple of games. But I mean, even then, he had plenty of ridiculous shots tonight and moves tonight. So I don't want to, like, he's still LeBron, right? But I still think there's that extra like 5 to 10% for him to get to in terms of like where he was at pre-injury. And then with Rui, it seems to be a little bit more, right? And so Rui said he's at 70 to 80% after the Chicago game. JJ said pregame that it's going to take Rui time, and he's not quite sure. There's no like timeline on it. There's no timetable. There's no like target game or date down the stretch where they're like, this is when we want Rui to look like Rui. They're just kind of taking it day by day with him. So I think that the Rui thing could be a bit of an issue for them longer term in terms of just like, what if he just can't quite get back to being who he was? And he was such a pivotal player and such an important piece. Like, that honestly might be my biggest concern right now, is just like, what if Rui can't quite get back to being Rui in a timely manner? And they've talked about it like it's not a for sure thing. And I don't know if they're just downplaying it and maybe there's more confidence internally, but like, I would say the way Rui talked about his injury and the way JJ's talked about it have not been encouraging, but based on what the Lakers are going to need from Rui, I think, to reach their ceiling. So I don't think they're cruising, to be honest. Like, now maybe sometimes when you get tired, you like, the body language isn't great, and I think we've seen elements of that. But I don't think, in my opinion at least, I don't think it's a lack of trying necessarily. I think it's been a lack of legs to some extent. I think with LeBron, maybe there's an element of energy conservation. We obviously saw that earlier in the season, and that's when people held on to that deep into the season of like, he doesn't play defense, but when that just wasn't true. But I also think he's coming off this injury, and he mentioned his groin is like, he's taking things day by day. So the Lakers are still banged up. Like that's another element here that we can't overlook. And I 100% agree with your last point. I think they are going to be fine. I think that the only concern, or the two concerns for me, would be dropping the standings a little bit lower than is ideal. And then what does Rui look like in like 2 weeks? But even those are minor concerns, I would say. Fang Charlie, thank you for the super chat. Yo, Jovan, it's nice to see you getting rest, load management for the win. I'm not worried about the Lakers. We still have time, but me and you still need to set up a time for our pod. LOL. Let me know, please. Thanks. Yes, we do. I have not forgotten. And I owe you I owe you a message on that, but we'll do it. We'll do it next week. And still not load managing. I'm still putting in. I'm still showing up and putting in the time. Steve Stevenson, thank you for the super chat. Katie to the Magic. Well, they'd have to give up Paolo or Franz. I mean, I don't see Phoenix doing it just for like Suggs and picks, or Suggs and Anthony Black and picks, or what. Like, I think you're gonna have to give up one of the blue chip guys. I'd consider it, but it would drastically alter the way that the team functions. I don't know if KD would be happy in Orlando. If you look at like he left Oklahoma City and then he went to San Francisco, Brooklyn, Phoenix. I don't like Orlando is a much smaller market, and I don't know if he would like that just based on his personality and how he is. And this probably just ignited a beef with me and Kevin Durant now. It's an interesting one. I mean, if there was a way to keep Paolo and Franz and get KD, that would obviously be interesting. I don't know that I would want to give up either one of those for him, though. Like, I think you at least have to think about it and think about the ultimate price. But I think that might be like now if they could create cap space to sign him. I don't know their cap situation off the top of my head. That would also be interesting. But I would assume they'd have to trade for him based on his contract. And yeah, I don't even think he's going to be a free agent anytime soon off the top of my head. Lakers in 7. Jovan, do you think there is some sort of deal or hypothetical deal that Rob calls up the Mavs again and tries to get Max or Max and someone else? And what would a trade look like? I would be very surprised if Nico Harrison and the Mavericks deal with the Lakers again. I think the one I guess it would be more of a combo package where if I'm trying to pick off guys from the Mavericks, I would want to get Daniel Gafford and Max Christie. And I think those two guys would help plug, like you get, I think, a better center than Jaxson, and you slide Jaxson to a guy who has reps with Luka as a starting center going to the finals. And even if you want to keep Jaxson, like you could start or bring either one off the bench, but now you have like two legit centers and a lob threat. Like both guys are lob threats. I think Gafford's better defensively, better rebounder, or more better rim protector, not as versatile as Jaxson, but whatever. And then Max, of course, I think would really help with the point of attack defense, and that was the role that he had before getting traded. In this hypothetical, I mean, the Lakers have they basically have the Mark Williams package. That's about it. So you could offer that. I think Dallas needs some wins, and I think Max is a win for them. I know he has not played as well lately, but I think in like longer term, they're going to be able to point to him as like a solid 3-and-D player that they got in that deal. So I don't even know what that trade would look like off the top. Like Max is making around $8 million. Gafford's at, I want to say 12, 13. So 20-ish million. I mean, you could you do Gabe and Kleba and a pick and a swap and like a second? But that might not be even enough for them. So yeah, I don't see any way that Dallas trades with the Lakers again. Ben, thank you for the super chat. What's your opinion on the Lakers moving away from sets? Whose responsibility is it? JJ, Luka, LeBron? I think it's a combination of everybody, but I think as the coach, I would put more of that on JJ and the coaching staff. I think it is partly Luka driven in terms of how he likes to run offense. Now, I think that there's a balance there, and because Dallas ran organized offense, so I don't want to say like they didn't do that with Luka, but I think almost in a way it feels like the Lakers have shifted a little bit too much toward what Luka wants to do. And it's hard to be clear. It's not like the offense has been bad, and it's not like they haven't been winning. So it has worked. It like has the offense been optimized? Has it been to the level that it can get to, that like the ceiling level? No. But even through like all this, like Luka's been their best offensive player. Like he was their best offensive player against Chicago, was their best offensive player tonight. He's largely been their best offensive player through the last few weeks as he's been playing better. So I think that the bigger thing I kind of think is that the Lakers, they're not really a Luka team in terms of the surrounding pieces. I think if they were building a team around Luka, I think it would look a bit different. And I think you would have more shooting. And I think the defense has obviously been like pretty good until recently, and he's fit in there. But like if we're talking about like offensively and optimizing the offense around him, I think it would look different. And I don't think they have enough shooting and shot making compared to like the depth of that they had in Dallas during the two runs that they made to the conference finals and finals. So that would maybe be one thing, but I think it is more of a coaching thing than anything, because even if it is like, let's just say hypothetically it is a Luka or LeBron thing, well, you can still coach, like you can still manage that as the coach. So that's where I like, even if they want to do things, JJ is the final decision maker, like, or at least he should be as the head coach. So I put it more on the coaching staff, and I think it is something that they need to address, because this has been an ongoing. I mean, it was even a problem before Luka got there, and then I think it's, and the thing is, we see like the Denver game in Denver, but with Luka, like when they run an organized offense, their offense does get to a certain level that's scary. It's just, and the Phoenix and San Antonio games, though, those teams aren't maybe the best example just because they're not good. But yeah, it certainly can be better. Ty, Lakers, thank you for the super chat. Lakers can't play small and slow, makes you smaller. Yeah, and that's actually, in some ways, I think the problem with the last like two matchups has been, like Chicago's pretty big, especially on the perimeter, and they're faster than like they've kind of played back-to-back games where I don't think they were like undersized necessarily against Chicago, at least in the front court, but more so in the back court. And then certainly against Orlando, they were at a size disadvantage and they were at a speed athleticism disadvantage. So I think teams that, for the most part, the Lakers, I think when they play smaller teams, they can envelop them and impose their will. But when they've been playing some of these teams that are bigger and quicker and more athletic, that's where they're at a bit of a disadvantage. The snow, Rui could have used another week. It's tough. It's tough because I don't disagree with you, and only time will tell ultimately like what, if that's the case or not. But it's like, you know, I think there were people like, why? I mean, I'll just say I saw it not really on the stream, but more so on social media, of Rui's milking this knee thing. Like Rui should be back. Like, so it's tough for athletes, I think, to kind of deal with the social criticism of, you're not playing through this, you're not coming back, you're not this or that. And then like they come back and then they don't look like themselves. And then it's like, well, they should have been out. Actually, he should sit this one out. And it's just like, feels like they can't win in either direction. So I commend Rui for trying to push through this and trying to play. Now, to your point, he has not looked like Rui. And I think the question kind of becomes, can he play through this and ultimately get back to looking like Rui? Is it like that type of situation? Or is it really like he potentially needs to sit out more games down the stretch here just to kind of, get back to looking more like himself? And the other thing I didn't mention with the upcoming schedule is that the Chicago game is the second night of a back-to-back. So we don't even know, like the Lakers have been like, Luka has had a interesting back-to-back schedule recently. But like what's going to happen with LeBron and Rui, Vando, Gabe, DFS, like more than half of the rotation has rested some games recently. So I know part of that was like punting games in Denver and against Milwaukee, but I would be surprised if every single rotation player plays Thursday in Chicago. I would assume at least one, if not a couple, don't play for injury management. So that's another thing here. I'm going to go about 5 to 10 more minutes. I am recording an episode for tomorrow on the 10 storylines in 10 game increments, the state of the Lakers. And then also I'm going to have Tim McMahon of ESPN on to talk about his new book on Luka, the Wonder Boy, talk through some of the Dallas side with the Luka situation and what he's seen from Luka in LA. And so going to have a couple of fun episodes this week. Hendricks, level of concern for third quarter blunders. I'm not too concerned because I think you could, like, with these types of things, there are sometimes trends that take place in a game. So, like, if it was the second quarter or the fourth quarter, I think sometimes it stands out a little bit more coming out, like starting each half can stand like starting the first, starting the third, and then like closing a game are often the times of a game that kind of stand out a bit more. Now, back-to-back games, third quarter was awful. And even going back to the Milwaukee game, like that one, I don't hold, that felt more just like, JJ compared the Lakers season to like a river, and they ran into a beaver creek, and it felt like Giannis and the Bucks were like I don't know, like alligators, which doesn't even really make sense with a river, but like coming down and breaking that, it just felt like they were holding up in the first half, but inevitably at some point Milwaukee was going to like overpower them and win that game. So that one I don't really fault. But back-to-back games with the actual rotation, that third quarter has been a bit of an issue. Sometimes I think with this group, like, I think maybe there's a psychological element of easing up a little bit. Orlando did enter halftime with momentum. Remember, the Lakers got it to 60-51. Orlando closed on a 7-0 run to, like, that's actually one that I think is a little bit more concerning for me, actually, is the closing quarters, because that's like, it feels like the Lakers, they go on a run right before a quarter closes. They take their foot off the gas, and then they let a team close a quarter with momentum. And then I think that carries over. So if anything, I think it might be more closing quarters that I'm more concerned with, because that's been a trend at times with this group. But in terms of the third quarter, I don't know. That's a tough one. I wouldn't say my level of concern is high, to be honest. I think it's more of a blip, and it's been, I know that there have been stretches throughout the season where they've been bad in the third quarter, so I'm not going to say that this is just like a 2-game sample size, but for whatever reason, I feel like sometimes they like, I don't know if they got to work on staying loose or staying warmed up like during halftime or whatever, but it does sometimes feel like they come out with a lack of energy in the third quarter, and they got to work on that, especially with like how good they've been in first quarters. Because especially since Luka got there, and partly because of how good he is in the first quarter, they've had some monster first quarters and double-digit leads, 15-point leads, 20-point leads. So I'm not that concerned about the third quarter, though, to be honest. Liberty, Lakers are on too many ISOs. I agree. And I think that the ISOing and the pick and roll mismatch hunting, when it's working, it looks great, but I think that they trend a little bit too much in that way. Joe Little, do you think we can still finish top 5? Yeah, I would still bet on the Lakers finishing top 5. Again, it's becoming increasingly tougher to get to. I think if you ask me top 3, that's they still can. I would say the odds have shifted a little bit lower after another loss tonight, but yeah, I think they're going to finish top 5. Kevin Cambridge, I had asked this before, but not sure if you saw it. Any chance you and Kenny will link up when the Lakers are in Chicago? I actually just talked to him today, and he's not going to be in Chicago when I'm there. But I did send him an open invite to Buha's block, so we'll see if that ends up working out. Oh, see, there's some beef going on. Kickstaff, do you think the Warriors will pass LA in the standings? I don't. It's certainly possible. Like I'd probably put it right now. The Warriors are 2 games back in the loss column. They're 8-2 in their past 10. LA's 3-7. So the teams are headed in opposite directions. They do play each other one more time. I talked about that on the episode of Buha's Block with Andy Kamenetsky of, aside from the OKC games, because we don't know yet how they're going to approach those games. With the way that Cleveland's losing, OKC might have the number 1 overall seed completely locked up by then in terms of like home court the entire playoffs. They already have home court in the West, but like they might already be ahead of Cleveland enough where they can rest guys. And so maybe they only play one of those games competitive against the Lakers. Maybe they play none of them and hold their cards close to their vest. So that game aside, which I think is obviously a barometer game if they go full tilt, to me, it's Golden State in that April 3rd game, because that, especially now with the Lakers sliding a bit, that could determine 4-5, 5-6, 3-4, like any combination of those seeds. And if the Lakers drop a couple more on this road trip, they could potentially be tied with Golden State going into, back into that homestand of they get back, then they play Houston, and then they play Golden State. So it does not get much easier for the Lakers coming off of this road trip. So I think they can. I would still probably put it 63-37 for now. But again, if the Lakers go 1-2 the rest of this week, that's when I think it starts to become a real concern. Kevin Cambridge, 416 watching, 77 likes. Let's run it up, chat. Let's do it. Let's get those likes up. I appreciate you all. Connor Phillips, are you more concerned about the offensive or defensive side of the ball? I like this question. It's one I've been thinking about because, to be honest, I think I'm a little bit more concerned with the defensive side of the ball. And maybe at some point I have to change my priors on the group's identity. But I still see like the high offensive ceiling there, especially in a playoff setting. I just have a hard time thinking that like any playoff defense can really limit Luka and LeBron in a 7-game series. Like I just, and then to say nothing of Austin and potentially Rui getting back to, having a little bit of a, 3 weeks until then, like maybe he looks more like himself in 3 weeks. He could play through this injury situation and play himself into better game shape and better rhythm. So I'm still bullish on the Lakers offense. I think the defense, as they've had more of a sample size of the way that they run their defense, I think teams are starting to pick at it a little bit more. I also think Vando's offense, which is partly an offensive concern, but I think it's impacted his role. And I feel like JJ's been playing Vando less and less, which I think in turn impacts the defense. I think Jackson's been a little bit more up and down over the past week. Like I think, again, kind of back-to-back rough games. Chicago and Orlando did play well against San Antonio and Phoenix. So I think overall has been playing like well, but that's just like they really need Jaxson to be consistent and like locked in every night. And that's just something that I want to monitor kind of the rest of this trip and just the rest of the regular season. So, and then LeBron and Rui playing through their injuries and that kind of impacting things. So I'm a little bit more worried about the defense right now, but I am worried about both sides of the ball, I guess. I would just say I think the offense I think they're going to recapture what they had before the injuries and like get back to and I still think there's a higher level that they've not even tapped into yet that we'll see if they can tap into it, but I think they can. The defense, I think like the blueprint on how to attack them is starting to come out a little bit, and that's where I'm a little bit more concerned of. I don't know if they can recapture the level of defense they had for those 2 months, but again, that's to be determined. Jerry Soriano, your lender for life, the best advertisement in the game. Thank you for the super chat. Is Kleba looking like a valuable playoff piece? It's determined. It's going to be determined by him returning and how quickly, if he can return. He is, I believe, set to be reevaluated next week. It is going to be the week that he is supposed to be reevaluated. So if he can be cleared and potentially play before the end of the regular season, as I had reported, there's some optimism with that. That would be a plus for the Lakers. I still think, to kind of bring things back to the Dalton conversation and the rotation conversation, I think there's the starters plus Rui, which again, we'll see how things play out with DFS and Rui. There's Gabe, that's 7. And then I think Goodwin and Vanderbilt are right there at 8 and 9. And then you get to Dalton at 10. So can like the optimal version of Kleba get to like the 10th spot, maybe the 9th spot? Maybe. I think that's like probably optimistic. I think more realistic is probably like the 11th man, and like maybe a breaking case of emergency. They want to throw out like a stretch big, and maybe Vando gets in foul trouble or something, but for now, I would more so assume he's probably just going to be a fringe guy. And because my expectations I guess my default expectations for a guy coming off injury are relatively low. And then you factor in how long he's been out and coming off of a broken foot. And he's a guy in his early 30s. Like, all those things give me some pause in terms of his ability to come in and make a significant impact. Now, I could be wrong, and he's got the rapport with Luka and JJ and DFS and Greg St. Jean. So from like a comfortability and familiarity standpoint, he could certainly come in and make an impact if he's physically right. But I think that's kind of unfair expectations to put on a guy who's missed at this point, most likely over 10 weeks. And that's just, and then to come in end of season, new team, new coaching staff, new teammates, new system on both sides of the ball. Like, that's just, it's the least ideal circumstances for anybody, let alone like a role player who was kind of having a rough season beforehand and trending a little bit downward in their career. So I'm not saying it's impossible, and I think there's a chance he could earn a back end rotation spot. I just think, based all the context and circumstances, to me at least, indicate it's probably unlikely. Tristan M, do you think LeBron should be more aggressive offensively in these late game scenarios? I think the Lakers need to do a little bit more to get LeBron going offensively in general. I don't even know if I would consider tonight a late game scenario, just because they got within 7, but that was with 5:39 left, and then Franz immediately scored. Jaxson got that offensive foul, and then LeBron traveled. Orlando scored again, and that was basically the game. They got it back to 11, and LA never got. They got within 8 a couple times, but it was never closer than that. So it was never like a one possession game where it. I know there's this whole narrative about like who's going to take the shot, LeBron or Luka, or what are they going to do, and I still think that is something that needs to be worked out. But I think with LeBron, it's more so, again, he just hasn't looked physically back to normal, which is fine and to be expected for a guy who just missed 2 weeks with a groin. Like, a groin injury impacts your entire lower body and your mobility and your movement. And it's also an injury that's like really easy to re-aggravate. He was also dealing with the foot thing. I don't know if we have clarity yet on like where that's at. I don't think we do. So then you add in age 40, year 22. Like, I think LeBron understandably has some reasons to not be back to being physically 100% yet. But I would like to see the ball in his hands a little bit more. I think they've shifted again, like very much in the Luka direction, which I don't blame them for that, for how great he is. But I still think, I think that they had a better balance pre-injury, and they were kind of finding that balance right before the injury, and then LeBron got injured. So I think, again, it just takes a little bit of time, and I would suspect by the end of the road trip, it's going to look better. Guru's son, the only problem on offense is the turnovers. I'm not sure if you're relating this to LeBron or in general, because the turnovers weren't bad today. They only had 10, which is below, like, you will take 10 turnovers basically any night. Obviously, you want as few as possible, and Orlando only had 8, so that kind of offset that. But LeBron only had 2 in 38 minutes. Like, that turnover to minute ratio is actually pretty good for LeBron. Luka had 3 in 38 minutes as well. So that's also a good ratio for Luka. So I don't think that, like, I think there were some costly turnovers tonight. As I just mentioned, they had back-to-back turnovers. They cut it to 7. Jaxson gets an offensive foul, or Franz scores. Jaxson gets an offensive foul. LeBron travels. Then Franz scores again. And that sequence right there, middle of the fourth quarter, that's what basically iced the game, took away the Lakers' chance of making it a 1-2 possession game. So I think there were some costly turnovers tonight, but in general, I thought they took care of the ball. I think they didn't make shots. I didn't love the shots they generated, and I thought the defense, especially in the second half, was bad. Ty, thank you for the super chat. This stretch is showing why we aren't a finals team, not complete enough of a roster yet. I'm just so gassed to have/watch Luka in playoff ball. I want to keep the perspective here of, like, I maintain I think the Lakers are the 4th best team in the league. I'm not swaying off of that based on these 2 losses, with Rui on a minutes restriction and clearly not being himself. LeBron still getting his legs back. I just, and losing to sub 500 teams. Like, this has also been a bit of a trend for this group going back, like, from, if we really look at like the second AD goes down against Philly, they lose that game. But like from that point on, they have tended to underperform against bad teams. That is like their losses since that point have tended to be against sub 500 teams. Looking at since then, they lost at Utah, home Charlotte, at Boston. LeBron gets injured fourth quarter, but also like Boston's Boston. So I'm not going to hold, like, that's an understandable loss. At Brooklyn to a man, everyone said like this was, we took them too lightly. We overlooked them. They lose at Milwaukee, but they're missing their entire front court. Like, that is what it is. Then they lose at Denver without everybody, but that was a close one. Then Milwaukee again without everybody, and then Chicago, Orlando. So if we put Milwaukee, the 2 Milwaukee losses and Denver to the side, because those are against good teams and they were undermanned in all 3 of them, they're like healthy losses. And even Brooklyn, I kind of want to include, but just by my own logic, I'll put even Brooklyn to the side. Their last like 3 healthy losses or four, excuse me, are Utah, Charlotte, Chicago, and Orlando. So like that kind of shows you Chicago's playing well. Orlando, they're fighting for the playoffs, but like those four teams are all under 500. And that kind of speaks to the Lakers and sometimes the lack of seriousness or lack of focus against sub 500 teams. So I think that's another part of this that maybe I didn't touch on enough earlier. I wouldn't say they can't get to the finals, though. I think it's far too early to write them off. And I don't want to speak for you, obviously, but I think there are some flaws and weaknesses with the roster, like basically every roster in the league, though I think Boston, OKC, and Cleveland have fewer flaws, which is why I think they're the three best teams. But your last point is that like Luka's been playing awesome. If you look at it statistically, the shot is not fully back yet, at least inside the arc. The 3-point shooting has actually been back, but his assists are up, his free throws are up, his threes are up, and his numbers are, again, like the counting stats, not the field goal, true shooting stuff. That's the best it's been all season. So like Luka's actually rounding into form right now, and I think that's a very encouraging thing for the Lakers. Again, assuming they can get physically right and continue to build on both sides of the ball and get more into like how they need to play. So Jonathan Lewis, thank you for off-topic question. You play a drinking game every time you say playing with verve. It's your crutch phrase. Love the show. Yeah, I actually had someone who I'll say someone with the Lakers pointed that out. I won't name them, but that verve is one of my favorite words to use. Yeah, I guess I just like saying it instead of, and like for me, it's a synonym for energy and or effort, depending on the context of how I'm using it. So, or like pace, I think it's got like multiple words it can use, and I do try to actually in my head as I'm saying things, I try to have a filter of I just use this word, so let me try to use a different synonym. But I verve is one of the words I guess I do like, but I'll try to use it less. Improvement. Hypothetically, could LeBron take $1 million a year salary to create a cheat code team? The minimum he could sign, I believe, is like high threes, around 4 million, just like the vet minimum for his years of service designation. But I mean, he hypothetically, yes. In reality, he's not going to do that. J note, name the player Jovan. It's not a player. It's not a player. Although again, as I said, I know, I think there's a couple players that have listened to the pod. DJ says they struggle with the young teams that typically suck, but their athleticism always cooks the Lakers defense, and the threes start falling, and everyone looks like a prime Larry Bird and Michael Jordan. Really good points there. I agree with basically all of it. Like, I mean, Charlotte, it was a similar thing, right? Where they were taking the Lakers off the dribble and getting out in transition against them. They were a young, athletic team. Chicago, Orlando. Then those teams start to make shots that they don't typically make. And I think it's partly just a limitation with the Lakers defense. Now, the issue is looking at the top three teams in the league. I think they all can exploit the Lakers to some extent in that way, where Boston, again, has both a certain level of shooting that makes it hard for you to help off of, but then also has the individual shot creation and shot making with two big forwards in Tatum and Brown. With OKC, they're kind of I think the Lakers can actually overpower them on the perimeter, but Shea is that type of player who I think is ascended to a certain level where like I don't just assume the Lakers can shut down Shea. I still don't know Chet and J-Dub. I want to see that in the playoffs, like what that looks like. I think J-Dub is in that like big forward wing prototype, skill set. So he could be a guy that could have success against the Lakers in a series. And Chet is a 7-footer who can protect the rim and space the floor. So kind of like Porzingis in a potential Boston matchup. And then Cleveland, I also think LA could overpower them on the perimeter, but they got a bunch of speed with Garland and Mitchell. They got 2 7-foot or close to 7-foot defensive beasts in Mobley and Allen. So those teams essentially present a lot of the same athleticism and youth and I'm not going to say verve, and just stylistic challenges that some of the younger teams that have given the Lakers problems, but they also just have like better top end, like Shea and Tatum and Mitchell are above a Josh Giddey or a Kobe White, and they're above a Paolo and a Franz. So it's like they have the top end talent that's better than those teams, and they also have, I think, better depth, and then also some stylistic things that are similar. So that's why, again, I think I put the Lakers fourth, and I think I would pick any of those 3 teams above them. Another super chat from Stephanopoulos. Yo, losses are more annoying than alarming in my honest opinion, but really hope we see more plays being ran with this group. We bail teams out with too much ISO. 100%. And I think the Lakers too are, I think that I like the word bailing teams out because I do think there's a lot of bail out offense going on here where it feels like sometimes there's a certain level of shot making, obviously, with Luka and Austin and LeBron in terms of the step backs and the pull ups, and those guys can make those shots, and they do make those shots every night. But it does feel like a contested step back 3 against a big or against a weaker defender is somewhat of a win for the defense. And I think it still needs to be more of an inside out operation. And I think when the Lakers offense has looked its best, it is that. And it is them living at the rim, getting to the free throw line, which they did do a lot of, but it feels like a lot of even the foul drawing has been a lot of like, they're kind of like the shot clock's winding down, they're running out of real estate, and they just like it's craft with Luka or Austin, and it's a head fake and the defender jumps and they draw the foul, but not as much like at the rim stuff as I would like. And I think once you do that has a domino effect that opens up the rest of the offense. But I think with the last couple games, they've been more outside. It's been more outside in than inside out. And I think they need to get back to more of their identity and more of their foundation. And you could also flip it and say, like, if you got to make shots to keep defenses honest, because I think defenses have seen how the Lakers offense has been functioning and they're trying to take that away. And there needs to be a certain level of shot making. And that does bring me back to the Dalton conversation. Like maybe they need to play Dalton more to open up and decongest the offense. But again, I think there's already kind of a log jam there on the perimeter. And then there's also the defensive side where they've been getting cooked defensively. And I don't think increasing Dalton's minutes is going to help that. I think it's only going to compound that problem. Another one from Tai. Thank you for the super chat. I agree Lakers are 4th best and the West plays small/light in general compared to East teams. Even OKC, I don't see many teams taking advantage of us. Exactly. Like if we just go through the West standings, outside of OKC, Denver's still a bit of a wild card because we've really only seen these 2 teams go head to head full health like once. But Houston, that's going to like those final 2 Houston games are going to be very revealing. I think Houston is the only team here that profiles as like the young athletic team that could really overpower the Lakers. I just don't think they have the shot making and offensive late game execution and rim protection ultimately with Şengün or even Steven Adams to beat the Lakers. Like I think you kind of need at least one of those two, but probably both to beat the Lakers. So it's like they certainly have some strengths in like the middle positions, but like even playing Fred VanVleet, I think that's the guy that Luka and LeBron will, even Austin, will target relentlessly. And then Şengün as the last line of defense, like I think that's problematic. So Houston, I still think the Lakers would beat them. Memphis, I think the Lakers have matched up well with them for the last few seasons. Golden State's could be a tough one because I think they excel small. They've been a top 10 offense and defense with Jimmy. Clippers are starting to play a little bit better. Minnesota, like I actually view the gold, and I made this point on the podcast with Andy that like I actually view the Golden State Clippers Minnesota tier a little bit more problematic than like the Memphis Houston tier, but we'll see if who the Lakers end up matching up with. But yeah, I don't. None of those teams are really going to overpower them. Like Ant could give them some problems. I think a healthy Kawhi, Jimmy, like I mentioned some of those guys, but I think there's ways to counter that. Like with the Clippers, I think there's a lot of guys they could pick on defensively. With Minnesota, I think that you can double Ant, and as long as your rotations are sound, you're not really fearing a lot of their guys offensively. Golden State, LeBron has dominated them. Luka's played well against them, but that one's a little bit more of a toss up for me until I at least like see it. But I still would favor the Lakers. So yeah, I mean, I think it's more of like a OKC whenever they play them, and or if they get to the finals, Boston or Cleveland. I think that's where I have some more concerns with those matchups. Ty. All-time, thank you for the super chat. All-time starting five to beat any other all-time starting five. I have to have LeBron and Steph at their position. I would probably go Steph, Jordan, LeBron. This is where it gets tricky. I almost want to go like kind of almost like KG and Hakeem, KG and Duncan, something like that, because I want some level of like defensive versatility, but also some space, like not guys who are entirely paint bound. And I think in both KG and Duncan's careers, they both progressively stretch the floor more. That's a tough one though. Like obviously, I mean, Shaq's my favorite player, but I do have some defensive concerns. I guess I have Steph in this case, so they're not going to attack it with Steph, but like Shaq's pick and roll defense was not great. And I think offensively with Steph, Jordan, LeBron, I'm going to be okay, regardless of who I put at the 4 and the 5. Thought about KD, but then you're pretty slight at the 4. And I think a Twin Towers look could give me some problems. So I might go KG at the 4 and then Duncan or Hakeem at the 5. I might lean Duncan. I think I would go Duncan, KG, LeBron, Jordan, Steph. Stephanopoulos, thank you for the super chat. Do you think Vando becomes an easier contract to trade just by him playing going into next year, or does his offense really zap his value? His offense zaps his value, and he's got 3 more years left. So I'm not saying he has no value. I'm not saying he can't be traded, but in general, I would say whenever I talk to opposing team personnel about Vando or just people around the league, their perception of Vando tends to be lower than I think what it should be and what it is for the Lakers. So again, I kind of made this point. I think Rui and Gabe to a lesser extent, but more so Rui, I think really rehabbed his trade value with his play this season. Gabe, I think, has been a little bit more up and down, but I think if he can, with Gabe, I think it's more of a health thing, honestly. And then Vando, I think it's a combination of health and the offense. And also he's got 3 years left, which I don't think anyone is clamoring to take on 3 more years of him. So I actually think he has more value to the Lakers than anyone else. I see people saying Shaq, people saying Kobe. You could go Kobe over Jordan, or you could go Kobe and LeBron at the 4. The way I view it is like if you could have versatile size, right? So like a Duncan, KG, LeBron front court is pretty. I think especially like KG and LeBron together, but even Duncan, I think for a center, which I know he's was listed as a power forward, but really was a center. I think that's pretty good versatility there. And then Steph and Jordan, I mean, Magic for Steph is its own conversation, but like with that, the shooting gives you an edge there. And then I think Jordan's the best shooting guard ever. Although I wonder, like, if we factor personalities, like Jordan and LeBron together might be a little problematic. Stephen Lee, Jovan, your final West standings predictions 1-8. Oh, you really want to hold me to this, huh? Okay, let me pull up Tankathon because I do believe in the strength of schedule factoring in here. As of right now, Lakers have the 4th toughest schedule. Memphis has 8th, Denver 11, Houston 12, Golden State 16, OKC's at 18. It doesn't really matter. Minnesota's all the way down there at 26. Wow, Minnesota's toughest games are Denver, Memphis, Milwaukee, Detroit. They only have 9 games left, but that's not like. Minnesota could. Huh. I will say. I actually think that the standings are largely going to stay similar. I'll say that Minnesota jumps the Clippers. And between Houston and Denver, they play each other once. Houston's got the Lakers twice, Golden State once, Clippers once, OKC once. Denver still got Memphis, Indiana. In terms of easy games, looks like Houston's schedule has I don't know. I think Denver might have the tougher schedule, and Jokic isn't back yet. And wait, did Denver just lost, right? Okay, so I guess I'm going to go as things stand. OKC, Houston, Denver, Lakers, Grizzlies, Warriors, Timberwolves, Clippers. So to give you I'll give you my first round prediction. I think Thunder Clippers is kind of fun, just given the trade history and the draft capital. I'll say the Thunder beats the Clippers in 6. I'll say the Clippers give them a little bit of a scare, and that is confirmation bias for a lot of people that OKC is beatable. I will say, how about this? I will give you a fun one. I will say Minnesota beats Houston in 6 in the 2-7. I will say Minnesota upsets Houston and gets to the second round. Then, Denver, Golden State. That's a really tough one. I'll say Denver beats Golden State in 7. And then I think you guys are going to like this. I'll say the Lakers beat the Grizzlies in 5. I think that's Lakers, Memphis, I think is a pretty good matchup for the Lakers, especially with home court. But I'm going to wrap here. I went a little bit over as always, but I still have some more work to do tonight, including recording an episode for tomorrow. So I will have more content coming out tomorrow, but that'll do it. Those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. I'll be back tomorrow with a new state of the Lakers, 10 storylines over the past 10 games. Technically, it's 11 games, but please don't hold that against me. I'll be back a little bit later in the week with, I still have my vlog coming out. I got to finish that. My son just left, so I'm going to have a little bit more free time before I head out on the road. And then also interviewing Tim McMahon about Luka and his new book that's coming out. So a fun week from a content perspective. We'll see if the Lakers could start winning and make it a more, we'll say, enjoyable week. But that'll do it. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for rocking with me. And I will talk to you all very soon.